Well, good morning or good afternoon, and a warm welcome to all. You've joined the session, Introduction to Digital Accessibility and Inclusion. This is the first technical training workshop in Module 1 of the Digital Empowerment Project, which is a nationwide initiative organized by the 6 U.S. regional museum associations that is dedicated to providing free, self-paced training resources for small museums. This inaugural series of online trainings and resource toolkits focused on digital media and technology topics is made possible by funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. My name is Zinnia Willits, and I am the Executive Director of the Southeastern Museums Conference. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a light-skinned white female with shoulder-length reddish-brown hair, which is curly today due to the spring humidity down here in the Southeast. I'm wearing a peach-colored blouse and am sitting in front of a backdrop of my home office, which is basically a desk and a computer, which I attempted to clean up for this session. As the host for today's session, I would like to convey a few things to our attendees before we begin the program. The Digital Empowerment Leadership Team chose Digital Accessibility and Inclusion as the first module in recognition of the fact that it is often the interaction between persons with impairments or disabilities and attitudinal, environmental, and technological barriers that hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. To prioritize digital accessibility is to actively work to break down those barriers. This first foundational module will provide training on how to integrate accessibility and inclusion into digital programs, social pages, and websites. Also, in this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute our physical space, our physical sense of place, it is important to reflect on the land we each occupy and honor the Indigenous people who have called it home. I am speaking to you from Charleston, South Carolina, the historical homelands of the Natchez Cusco peoples. Wherever we are, let us acknowledge all Indigenous nations as living communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We, the Digital Empowerment Project team, recognize that our organizations and those of our members were founded within a colonizing society that perpetuated the exclusions and erasures of many Native peoples throughout the United States and beyond. We ask you to reflect on the place where you reside and work, and to respect the diversity of cultures and experiences that form the richness of our world and our profession. Thank you. And now for just a few housekeeping notes before we introduce today's presenters and get started. I'd like to acknowledge today's ASL interpreter, who will be on the left side of your screen. And of course, we set up an online community forum for raising questions, posting answers, and connecting with your fellow museum practitioners on the Museum Learning Hub website, which you can find at museum-hub.org. If you are looking for help between programs, please visit this forum, create a login, and post your questions. A member of the community or one of our student technology fellows will get back to you. Finally, to stay connected with us and be aware of future programs, please follow us on social media, and links will be posted in the chat. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. Today we'll hear from Sina Baram, who is president of Prime Access Consulting, which is an inclusive design firm. Sina is an accessibility consultant, computer scientist, researcher, speaker, and entrepreneur. Sina will be joined by Corey Timpson, principal of Corey Timpson Design. Corey is an active collaborator and thought leader in the museum experience, design, and inclusive museum discourses within the cultural sector. You can learn more about our presenters from their full bios, which are available on the Museum Learning Hub website. I'm so thankful for the time each has devoted to this session. And now I am pleased to turn the floor over to Sina Baram and Corey Timpson.
I'm a 6 foot tall male with dark hair and a shortly cropped beard, wearing a polo shirt, and I happen to be blind, which informs the lens through which I do the work that we're talking about. I'm joined here by one of the most awesome humans I have the pleasure of working with, Corey Timpson, and I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Sina. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Corey Timpson. I'm a designer who's been working in the cultural sector since 2000. Everything I work on in partnership with Sina Baram follows our inclusive design and accessibility methodology. And we're really happy and pleased to be able to present some of these concepts to you today. I'm a white male of Italian descent. Don't let my name fool you. I have very little hair. It seems like decreasing in volume by the minute. And I am wearing one of my 24 plain black crew neck t-shirts, a black hoodie, and black plastic framed glasses. And with that, thanks again. And let's get into our deck because we have a lot to cover today. So we're going to be covering the Intro to Accessibility and Inclusion, the technical workshop number 1. We're really going to be looking at digital media, digital technology, and but we're going to start off with a few concepts to begin with, so that it's sort of level set and get us all on the same page. So anything we work on follows this ethos, which is an inclusive design methodology, and a little bit different from accessibility. What do we mean? We mean that rather than design and develop something and then try and figure out how to make it accessible, we try to consider all vectors of human difference at the outset. That means that later down, we don't have to try and figure out how to change what we were thinking about, because there's no need to change, because we've been thinking about everyone at the beginning and all those vectors of difference. It really means that accessibility for us is an output of this methodology. It's not, our starting point. We also start operating among a premise. And the premise is basically that we have intentions, whether we're drafting a policy, whether we're developing an exhibition, whether we're creating a digital product or a digital channel or a digital system or marketing collateral, so on and so forth, an event. We have these intentions, and we also want to recognize that our audience has intentions. And so what we want to do is ensure that we're living up to our responsibility, which is that we want our intentions to line up as best as possible with the intentions of our audience. When things don't line up, that's when barriers exist, and we want to make sure that we have as few barriers as possible. So we want to know what those intentions are on the part of our audience as we're developing our own. And one of the byproducts, we talked about accessibility just a second ago as being an outcome of this methodology. Another is innovation. Sina and I have been, very fortunate to work on a number of projects in Asia, Europe, the US, and Canada in particular. And, anytime we've been recognized internationally for some kind of innovation award or so forth, we can directly trace it to the fact that we're following an inclusive design methodology. Now, why does this matter? Well, obviously, this is the right thing to do. As a cultural organization, we have responsibilities in terms of the preservation of knowledge and cultural heritage, et cetera. We want to be stewards of those collections, and we want to ensure that everyone, period, can access those collections. So it is the right thing to do. It's also the law. There's legislation, there's the ADA, there's a legal aspect to being accessible and being inclusive as well. But, let's just kind of check those to the side and think about the fact that 1 in 5 people has a disability. That's 1.5 billion people in the world. 1 in 2 people over the age of 35 will experience a disability in their lifetime. When we're thinking about what we're spending our time on, why we're spending this time doing what we're doing, immersed in our careers and in our practices, let's think about who we're doing this for and understand that, we're looking at like really 50% of our market. Those numbers, we just want to bring a quick highlight point to. They're independent of socioeconomic status, gender, station. We know that it's, incidents of disability are higher amongst historically marginalized communities and groups. And, these numbers don't consider temporary situations. the student who arrives on site for a programming activity and broke their ankle playing soccer the night before. I'm wearing glasses. What happens when I don't have my glasses and I forget them? There's a number of temporary situations that can be accommodated as well. So rather than like get too detailed and in the weeds and breaking things down into demographics and stuff, let's just consider that like there's a really an innumerable amount of reasons why we want to be inclusive and accessible. So now we'll kind of really jump into things.
So digital accessibility, right? What do we mean when we're talking about digital accessibility? One working definition that we can use is the ability of all people to use a website, an app, digital interactive, a kiosk, any digital product, with or without assistive technologies, right? So what are assistive technologies? What do we mean by that? Well, I'm using an assistive technology right now. I'm running a screen reader, which is reading my screen to me. It's reading these slides to me as I'm talking to you. And I've got earbuds in. So I can hear that voice reading these slides to me because they're accessible, because we've made them semantically accessible. But there's other assistive technologies as well. For example, a lot of folks who use a screen reader, they may be blind or low vision, will also use it with an accompanying Braille display. This is a device that has a refreshable series of dots, and so you can feel the Braille under your finger. That's especially important to keep in mind for deaf-blind audiences who may not be able to use speech to access technology, but can use Braille in order to do so. You've got zoom and magnification for low vision folks, or anyone who needs the contrast increased, as well as things like black and white mode or grayscale or inverted colors. With respect to physical differences, there's all sorts of assistive technologies built into our devices. Sticky keys is one concept where you can use the keyboard on your computer, but with one hand. It's a concept whereby the operating system lets you, if you need to perform a keyboard shortcut, it lets you press the keys individually and then let them go. So that way, if you don't have the use of both of your hands, you can still operate a keyboard and use keyboard shortcuts. There's one-handed hardware keyboards. There's eye tracking. If you're unable to use physical limbs in order to actuate technology, we can track your eye or your head movements and use that to move a cursor on the screen. You can have voice-driven interfaces. A lot of us are familiar with voice-based assistants like Amazon's devices or Google's or Apple's, and these are great assistive technologies as well. On the cognitive and verbal side, there's something called augmentative and alternative communication, AAC. These are devices by which folks can communicate by pointing to something on a screen or using a dedicated keypad or in any other adaptive way interacting with technology, but maybe in a different way than we all have come to expect, right? The standard keyboard and mouse and monitor. So we should keep these things in mind, right? And so when we're thinking about web accessibility, we need to keep in mind that if we can code to a set of standards, and we'll talk about that in a second, we don't have to know how a screen reader works. We don't have to get into the weeds per se about how somebody might zoom the website to 300% zoom. If we follow best practices and a set of rules, then we can make this content more inclusive and more accessible. So what are those rules? Those rules are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG for short. WCAG is versioned, so version 2.1 is what you want to be targeting. And the conformance level is broken down into 3 areas, A, AA, and AAA. So the major takeaway from this is, if you're writing a contract, if you're shopping for a web vendor, if you're looking for technology to purchase, one of the things that's easy to ask for, sometimes harder to deliver on the behalf of the vendor, but easy to ask for and require in your procurement practices is WCAG 2.1 level AA conformance. This is something you can build in to your purchasing requirements, your RFPs, and your contracts. We're happy to answer questions about the specifics of those rules, but that's the general guidance there. So how do we test for web accessibility? We can use tools that are built into browsers. Chrome has an accessibility checker built right in. It's not going to find everything. It's not going to ensure that your product or website is completely accessible, but it's a good first pass. You can zoom in on your browser to 200% and just try to use your website that way. Or my favorite exercise that I always like to have people do, just try to use your favorite website, go through the whole day, only using your keyboard. Don't let yourself use your mouse at all and see how far you get. That's a great indication of how accessible something may be. Also making sure that when we're testing with these assistive technologies, we involve the communities we're trying to serve. And that means native users of these assistive technologies, blind folks who use screen readers, low vision folks that use Zoom enlargement, things of that nature. We have a video coming up. I don't know if the audio will stream on here. If not, we can talk through it. But Corey, if you want to hit play on that, and let's see if the audio is coming through. I am not hearing it, if that's helpful.
You're not hearing it? Okay, one second.
If there's a share audio.
1 second, I'm going to reshare.
And while Corey does that technical machination, what we're about to see is a video that demonstrates a screen reader, like the one that I use personally on my computer, interacting with a website, just to kind of get a sense of how somebody who's blind or low vision may use a piece of assistive technology in order to access the web.
Are you hearing it?
Let's find out. No, I'm not. So that's fine. What I'll do, just for purposes of demonstration, we can skip that, is just really quick, we can use broadcast audio. I demo this concept on my phone.
55%, 45%.
So as I move my finger around the screen,
Vision folder, games folder, dock, phone, settings.
I can swipe, I can perform gestures, and I can navigate this screen. And that's really important, because what that means is that I'm able to access the content on there. But the reason I'm able to, just like on a website, which we'll share the video after this webinar, or on an iPhone app, or on a digital kiosk in a museum, it's because the developers and designers have created an interface where a button doesn't just have an icon, it has a textual label. Right? Sometimes that label is visible, sometimes it's not. It's because the designers and developers working together have used a focus outline. So when you're tabbing on your keyboard, you know what element you're on. And there's more examples in that video that we'll share after this talk. So let's talk about—
just to note that the focus highlight is visible on screen right now, or around the title of the page. Yeah,
fantastic.
That's the red box that is around the title of that post.
And that box that Corey is talking about, that will move as your focus moves across the page. And that's how, as a sighted keyboard user, you know what element you're currently focused on. And this is very important. There's a concept going around right now, and these are called access overlays, right? They are products from vendors that will happily charge you anywhere from 30 to 60 bucks a month and offer to install a third-party extension with just one line of code on your website, and they claim to make your website accessible. These are completely snake oil, and you should run away if anybody ever tries to offer you something like this. To put this in perspective, if something like that existed, I and every other blind person would be injecting that to every website we visited to make the web more accessible. They simply don't work, and they use really deceptive marketing practices, but people want to do the right thing. So they say, oh, well, I should go get that product and use it. Please stay away from these access overlays. They do absolutely nothing for accessibility. And in fact, they can make your website less, not more accessible. The other thing is timing, making sure that when you have a website project, a digital project, even if you're producing documents, don't wait until the end to check the accessibility. Make sure that you're incorporating accessibility and inclusive design at the beginning of the product, at the beginning of the process. So in terms of process, this is exactly what we're talking about, not including accessibility and inclusive design during testing and development is where things tend to break down, right? So anything we can do to build in those checks and those requirements and then assess how we're doing. We may not be doing perfect. We may have to leave certain things for the next project or an iteration. That's fine, but just consider these things up front and during the process. And don't rely on automated tools for checking. They're helpful, but they can't capture everything. So with respect to web accessibility, very quickly, from a project management perspective, there's usually a pipeline that should be followed. You do a design evaluation when you're doing wireframes and files that are going to show how the website's going to look. Do a design evaluation there. Check those colors, check focus highlighting, check link decorations, that sort of thing. Then we flow into working either with yourselves, volunteers, or a vendor, for example, like ourselves, on digital accessibility, checking the accessibility of the website markup. Then we flow into content accessibility and really thinking about alt text and visual descriptions of images. The next workshop in this series is going to talk about visual descriptions and audio description in greater detail, followed by a WCAG audit, but only if it's required, because oftentimes if you follow these other steps, the audit is not worth it. And really quick on recommendations, please avoid Wix and Squarespace if you can, preferring WordPress for website construction. It just tends to lead to a more accessible website. You can use the accessibility ready filter when you're looking for a WordPress theme to filter those WordPress themes by those that are going to be more accessible. This is a really easy thing you can do. Check the box, look for an accessible theme, and you're at least 80–90% of the way there on having a more accessible WordPress website. There's a Wave extension, but in deference to time, we'll leave the reference on the screen here and happy to talk about it during the Q&A. Same for the color contrast checking tool. Corey, over to you.
Yeah, and main point on the last one there, that just test. No one wants to sound like Donald Rumsfeld, but you know, we don't know what we don't know, and that's why, you know, we're always so adamant about testing. Now, that's the website, but the website's going to present media. And what do we mean by media? Well, we mean the text, the images, the videos, the audios, everything that's going to be presented through that website, through that digital channel. So we need to make sure those things are accessible as well. So the next session, we'll get into media affordances, particularly around video, but just in sort of very quick summary, or preview, let's make sure that we have alt text and visual descriptions filled out for anything that's graphic or image based. Let's ensure that we have captions for audio and video. If we have transcripts, you know, nothing's being developed on a typewriter these days, it's all born digital. Let's ensure those transcriptions are made accessible, particularly on web and mobile experiences and platforms. And signed interpretation, we're seeing that right now for this video feed, and let's ensure that that's available as well. You know, if we have collaboration materials, such as when we're developing a workshop or an activity, let's have guidelines for how we want those things developed. You know, just putting something into a PDF doesn't mean it's accessible. Let's make sure that we're following proper document semantics and styles. You know, when you're using Word, rather than, you know, creating your own visual hierarchy that has no semantic structure behind it, what do we mean? Making the title the largest thing by bumping up the font size, bolding it, and, you know, changing the color. That's all great, but let's actually do that in the styles pane and then apply the styles to the text that's on screen so that there's a semantic structure and someone with a screen reader is actually able to tab across the page and navigate that page the same as a visual user would do it. Also, please don't take photos of text. This is like extremely common on Twitter. Let's include text, not as a photo. In terms of alt text, you know, let's make sure that it's not just for photos, but it's for all kinds of visual presentations. And let's make sure that it's included. Let's, you know, like make sure as a test, if you're reading the alt text back as sort of a review of it, let's make sure that it makes sense. If the image wasn't there, if the alt text was in its place, does it make sense? That's a really good kind of simple check. And let's make sure that the descriptions, that the length of the descriptions match the visual complexity of the visual information being presented. So let's not have our descriptions be super long. Let's not have them be super short. Let's have them match up with, you know, the visual information that's being presented as well. Thinking specifically about mobile, you know, we like to say there's tens of thousands of dollars of assistive technology that's built into every iPhone right now. And let's, it's right there. Let's use it when we can and not prevent people from being able to use it. This is one of my favorite screenshots now. This is the index page of the accessibility features that come with the Apple operating system. I had my son take this picture of my phone because the index page itself is so long, we can't just do one screenshot anymore. We need to do two. That's how many features are built into the phone. There's tons of opportunity online to figure out how to customize and use these features, and at least make sure that we're not preventing others from being able to use these features. There is an enormous amount of technology here that we can take advantage of.
That includes everything from just screen reading to screen enlargement to switching the colors to one-handed usage to replacing the icons with labels like on off instead of a slider. There's so many things that are just built into the iPhone. Hearing aid compatibility, all of that is built in. If we make our content accessible, it'll be compatible with that assistive technology.
In terms of social media considerations, there are limitations that are put on us by the platform. Obviously, we want to use these platforms. They're quote unquote free in many cases. Obviously, we're giving up a lot of data information, etc. So they do come at a cost. But and in the cultural sector, let's just be aware of the fact that these are third-party platforms, and we might be inadvertently or unaware that we're giving third-party perpetual licenses to any information that we're posting on those platforms. However, that's where people are spending their time, and we obviously want to get our information and our content and our services out to where people are already spending their time. So be aware of the limitations. You don't control the platform. They could push an update, tomorrow, and it may change, what your intentions were on how things would be presented and representing of your organization. So let's just be aware that we don't control these platforms, but you do control the content. So, if we want to ensure that we present our primary asset via text and image and audio, video, as well as the child and support assets, some of those affordances that we went through earlier, let's make sure we include those as much as possible, because then irrespective of how those platforms may change, we know we're at least protected in the fact that we've surfaced those affordances. You can control the metadata in a lot of these cases, and so let's be aware that metadata goes a long way as well into serving all audiences. So some social media do's. Let's describe our images when possible. Let's include captions and transcripts when possible. Use the title case in hashtags. What do we mean by the title case? That means where the first letter of every word is in uppercase and the rest of the words are in lowercase. So you can see the hashtag inclusive design here. There's an uppercase I and an uppercase D. That helps ensure that, not only is it more easy to consume visually, but that a screen reader will read inclusive design, not inclusive design. Use hashtags like A11Y to engage with the community. This is a numeronym, so 11 is the number of characters and letters in between the A and the Y in accessibility. So if you see hashtag A11Y, that means people are engaging in the accessibility community using that numeronym.
And that's a wonderful hashtag to reach out to. So if you have questions around accessibility and inclusive design, it's a wonderful tribe of people around the world that are just really passionate and caring about inclusion and accessibility. So it's a nice way of plugging into that community.
Social media do's. Oh wait, no, we just said that, sorry. Social
Don'ts.
Wait a second, there's a glitch in the matrix. Social media don'ts. Don't post images of text. We've kind of covered that already. Don't front load posts with mentions. Now, there are some limitations around this, such as when you're replying to a tweet that has a bunch of mentions. But Sina and I are in a really great community called Tweers, which is basically like a Twitter social media cheers when you're having a beverage. And unfortunately, or fortunately, there's about 48 different people who are mentioned on that thread now. So for example, for Sina, every time he gets a tweet that mentions him, he sits through the screen reader reading out 48 different people before he actually gets to read, what the content of that tweet is. So that's something called semantic prioritization. So we want to prioritize the message above the tweets, above the mentions in this case. Don't use animated GIFs as a surrogate for video. There's way more affordances that are available with videos than there are with animated GIFs. Animated GIFs seem to be making a strong comeback of late. And let's try and ensure that, we're thinking inclusively around how we're presenting media. And don't use automated generations of captionings without editing. It's just not going to get everything right. It's improving all the time, this type of technology, but obviously still has a long way to go. These are some screenshots we'll go through really quickly. So this is, some screenshots of Twitter and showing the interface and where you can add alts within the Twitter interface design. So they have changed this a lot recently because there was a real issue only up to a couple months ago about being able to add alt text to images. It is there as of today. Tomorrow, who knows? One of those pitfalls, but the functionality is there. We just kind of have to know about it and work that into our workflow. If there's people at the museum who are responsible for social media, make sure they understand that if they want to reach a larger audience, they want to include alt text on their images that are being used in Twitter. One of the worst instances is sadly, is in Instagram. And what you can see on the left screenshot is all of the great things you can do, and then this tiny little text in gray at the bottom that says advanced settings. If you click on that, you get the next screen, and if you scroll to the bottom of that screen, you can see write alt text. That's where you would add the alt text to an image in what is effectively an image sharing platform. So quite disappointing. Something Sina and I are actually, kind of taking on as a challenge to try and get Facebook to change this, because as we can see on the screenshot on the left, there is more than ample space to right beneath tagged people, add location, to add alt text. No reason for it to be buried that far into the platform itself. And then, YouTube has a number of options, but one trick is being able to upload a transcript and having it automatically be time coded to the video, and then you can download that. You don't even have to present your video on YouTube in order to take advantage of the service. But just to say, this is where the screen where that happens. This screenshot right here.
And the important thing there is to understand that YouTube does offer automatic captions, and some of this has been in flux because they're revisiting their captioning policy. But be very careful not to use those automated captions in production because of those pitfalls that Corey just warned about. However, the time syncing capability is super powerful and a free feature.
Just in terms of the website and web presence, we really want to ensure that we're managing expectations before people arrive on site. So one of the things that Sina and I kind of deliberately harp on is this idea of managing expectations. And the website is a great tool where we can publish all kinds of information. There's a lot of websites for museums right now that are letting people know what the COVID protocols are before people arrive on site. That's fantastic. There's no reason that we can't take advantage of that exact same concept, for everything we're doing in the future. What are the more sensory stimulating locations in the museum? Where are there quiet spaces? Which restrooms have change tables? Are there gender neutral restrooms on site? What material, is containing perhaps things that aren't hypoallergenic? There's a number of things that we can surface on the website for before people ever arrive on site. And this is something that, frankly, we can all do a lot better job on. And it's, quite easy. This is just an example from the Royal Alberta Museum website. So they're saying at this time, we do not have wheelchairs or strollers available for public use. Now, we hate this. That this is the stance, not to put too fine a point on it. And I feel we could say that quite admittedly because we just did the keynote for the Alberta Museum Association. However, the good thing is that they're surfacing this information before people come on site, are needing that accommodation or affordance or expecting it, and then finding out that it's not available. And I think with that, we can open up the Q&A.
Yay, I'm back. Thank you both for that. I know that I was taking many notes and will be watching this presentation again, just as a leader of an association with social media channels and website content and lots of really great practical takeaways, I think, for our attendees today. So we do have a few questions that have come in and are still continuing to come in. I'm going to start with this first one. And Sina mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, but can someone talk about accessibility settings on iPhone and iPads? specifically voiceover. The questioner, Joseph Broda, said, I'm working on an app and want to do the best I can to make it accessible for those with disabilities.
Sure. So there's a couple of things there. So you're asking about the accessibility affordances that you can build in. Apple has accessibility guidelines that you can follow. And so that would be something that, because you're developing an app, I'm assuming that you're familiar with. But if not, on Apple's development website, there is an entire series of pages around accessibility and what you can do. A couple of things to keep in mind there are taking advantage of the fact that you can put programmatic labels on buttons as you're building your app so that they actually read out correctly with voiceover, using standard controls whenever you can, and also making sure that the swipe order is logical. So what we mean by that is, if you've got an app, let's say you've got a table sort of component that you're displaying a grid of information in. You may think, I want to make all of the nodes in that table accessible. So you would go do that. I won't dive into the code right now, but happy to talk offline about it. That actually may not be the approach you want. The approach you may want is to make each row of the table accessible, because then you can expose the actions on that row through other methods. And so these are the kinds of considerations that are documented on Apple's website, but happy to talk to you about it. So feel free to reach out as well. And then going back to Corey's point, test, test, test. VoiceOver is built right in. Turn it on. You can assign it to triple click of your power or home button, depending on the kind of iPhone or iPad you have. And that way you can turn it on, test with it, and turn it off if that's not an assistive technology you need to use on a daily basis.
Even with Siri, I think you can just say, you know, hey,
turn on VoiceOver.
Yeah.
You're trying not to say it so you don't trigger it on your device.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you both for that. I'm going to switch now to a few questions about alt text. So the first one came in from Yvonne Muller. Is using the alt text feature on Instagram better than just writing an image description in the caption?
Well, so it depends. We need to talk about surfaceability of alt text, because alt text or alternative text, the visual description of an image, has traditionally been relegated to something that is thought is only useful for blind and low vision folk. And this is not true. Many, many people benefit from visual descriptions. So it is a good idea to visually surface them. However, because Instagram as an app takes that alt text you write and exposes it to assistive technologies in the correct way when you use that field that Corey was talking about, we would say, yes, put your visual descriptions in the alt text field. Now, there's nothing preventing you from also surfacing them in the body of the post. There will be a little bit of redundancy there, but you may get some advantages about that depending on the communities that you are participating in. But when an alt text field is available in an app, Twitter, Instagram, that sort of thing, do use it because it exposes correctly to assistive technologies.
Thank you. This next question is somewhat related. Is there a problem with posting images of text if you also post that text as alt text or in the description?
That's a great question. It can be. And the reason is, think about zooming in. So let's not worry about somebody like myself who's using a screen reader that would benefit from the alt text, like you're saying in your question. But let's talk about somebody who's low vision and they've got their zoom at 250%. Now that text is going to start getting pixelated. It's going to start not looking correctly. It's going to not be able to have its background flipped automatically by the computer. It's not going to be able to support things like word tracking or line tracking that certain enlargement software offers. So whenever you possibly can avoid doing so, whenever you humanly conceivably can avoid posting or using images of text, you absolutely should. However, if you have no other choice because of a certain technical limitation, at least the other part of your question kicks in, please, please, please make sure that the text in its entirety is in the alt text. But remember, even that's not an equivalent, because if you are displaying an image of a website, there's not only text on there, there are components and headings and navigational elements none of that gets exposed in alt text. It's all flattened to just this text blob.
Yeah, and I just want to like maybe follow up by saying, Sina said flipping the background.
Mm-hmm.
So using some assistive technologies and certainly with different color blindnesses, there's an ability to have white on black, flip it to black on white. You can change it to like yellow on black. Like there's a number of different color combinations that can be used to ensure as high contrast as possible. So if it is an image or pixel based, like it's not going to do that like as if it's true text. And then the other thing is, we're not saying also like if you're wanting to post a photo of a sign, by the side of the road because of whatever, like please include the text that's on that sign, in the alt, but don't not post the photo of the sign that you want because, of whatever reason you're posting it. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's just simple thinking through one more step or two more steps, whatever it may be, and training ourselves to go further with that image.
And Corey gave a great heuristic for that, right? Imagine the image is not there. Now, is the text that you wrote for the alt text sufficient to totally understand what's going on? If the answer is yes, then you've done a good job with your alt text. That's why it's called alternative text. It's an alternative to the image.
It's a great way to think about it. Okay, so this next question came in from Amelia Giordano. Can you please give examples of accessibility overlays so that we know exactly what programs to avoid?
I have no problem naming names. Access-B and Userway are a couple. There are other products as well. These are, again, usually 40, 50 bucks a month. They offer extensions for your website. Developers love them because it's one click, it's one line of code, takes 5 seconds to install, and it's the worst thing you can possibly do.
Corey, anything from you on that one?
No.
Well, for the time being, those were the questions that had come in. So we still do have about 10 minutes left in our session. If there are any other topics you want to expand on that maybe you wanted to spend a few more minutes on that were in your presentation?
I had one thing I'd mentioned. We glossed over the Wave toolbar just because we were worried about time a little bit. But the Wave extension is a good one to install in your browser. Again, it's not going to catch everything, but it does highlight a few accessibility errors like color contrast, like missing alt text on images, like buttons that don't have a label associated with them, or form fields like a username, password that don't have the right attributes on them, things like that. So the Wave extension is a good one to install. And then when we mentioned the accessibility tools in Chrome, we didn't say how to access them. If you bring up the dev tools, which is usually F12, and there's a way to do it with your mouse as well, you can go to audits and accessibility, and that's the Lighthouse tools that they're using there to actually do an accessibility check of the website. Again, it will only in its most perfect state catch about 20 to 25% of errors, but it will at least tell you about all of the low-hanging fruit when it comes to accessibility on the page.
Thank you, Sina.
I'm trying to share my screen again just so I could show the Chrome Wave plug. There we go. So if you manage your extensions on Chrome, and a lot of extensions are now available for Safari as well, and have been available for Firefox forever. But here's the Wave extension. So just clicking Wave, we're going to see on this page. I could have probably chosen a more error-prone website, but there are 0 errors. There's 1 contrast issue. There's 11 alerts, and then you can go into the details and see what some of those are. We have 1 redundant link on this page. 1 piece has very low contrast. So it's to the point being that it's a good insight, but not something we would want to rely on, but could certainly start to surface some insights for further exploration.
it's also easy, right? I mean, Corey, you brought that up in 5 seconds, 10 seconds.
Right.
It's something easy that you can just do when you receive a web page, when you're on even a website that may not be yours, in case you're curious, oh, how accessible is this? I want to send it to some people, and I want to make sure I'm sending out an accessible resource. So that's the power of it, that it's just one click away, one keystroke away to just run as a habit when you're thinking about the accessibility of web content.
Okay. Thank you for that follow-up. So we
maybe
still,
one.
good. We've still got some more time, so let's keep going if
Yeah,
we
I
can.
think, you know, we talked a lot about web. There's an increasing amount of digital media being presented in galleries and on site. And so we just want to say that everything that we've talked about in terms of the web principles here are certainly applicable when you're developing a kiosk in gallery. And if we think about, you know, things that have been happening during COVID and a reticence to touch things, you know, if in gallery we are using a web approach to digital presentation, then it means we're you know, one short step away from just making it available on an intranet or on an internal Wi-Fi system to any of the visitors who come in to be able to use their own devices, not just use the kiosk. There are other tools like Free Touch, which is a mobile app that can be you know, used by museums that get away from the touchscreen, allow people to use their own mobile device as a mouse on the touch screens that are in gallery. So, you know, if we think about the in-gallery digital presentations in a web, you know, sort of way of thinking about things and design development processes, then know that we're in a really good scalable position for basically anything that comes along next. So, and as we've experienced during the pandemic, we want to ensure that our content balance remains, you know, consistent, that we don't like just shut down and create barriers for accessibility while we're trying to, you know, deal with, you know, fomite transmission or whatever happens to be the case. So like the whole approach to in-gallery digital, you know, we're a big proponent in following the same processes as we do for, you know, web.
And take advantage of the built-in assistive technologies. If you're able to have a website full screened that has your content and put that on an iPad, then you can put a program in place, whether it's a docent or visitor services staff or anyone can turn on a screen reader or enable assistive technology devices on that iPad. It's built right in. You don't have to necessarily then be using a specific piece of hardware that may not be as accessible, and you're able to display your content. If it's not able to be done in gallery, like Corey is saying, making anything available on your website, whether it's the label text, whether it is the images with extended visual descriptions, whether it's the sensory map, like Corey was talking about. These are the hot and cold areas of the museum. These are the bright and dark areas of the museum. That kind of information, the more you can surface it for people up front and on the web where you can ensure that it's pretty accessible, it's a really great way of thinking about it. The other thing worth thinking through with respect to in-person experiences is that people are going to be in different places. Some folks like myself, technically advanced, very comfortable using an iPhone. I'm happy to just get a URL or a web address and go somewhere and read it on my phone. But others might prefer something a little bit more classical, like, for example, the material in Braille, or like the material as an audio file or audio stop in an app or physical hardware audio tour. So just think about your audience and the makeup that you happen to know is there, and adjust these affordances we're talking about so that you're providing the information in a variety of ways: print, large print, high contrast, Braille, speech, etc. But do it in a way that is cost effective for yourself and achievable to be sustainable over the long run. So it's something easy that can be built into your process. And then listen to your visitors. As they complain about something, it's, you know, we love that. Like we're folks that we really love it when people complain, because every single complaint is an opportunity for enhancement and improvement.
And just really one follow-up point to earlier about using the web approach in gallery or on site is there might be concerns around like copyright and rights management around content. Say, you know, there's a 30-second video clip that's licensed from the Getty and it's super expensive to put on social media, but it's not as expensive to run in the gallery. Well, we can geofence these things, right? So that if people are using internal Wi-Fi, or we set up a geofence within a certain coordinates, like a geolocation, then people can access that content, which means if they're on site, they can use their mobile device and access that content. But if they're not on site, they go to access that content and they're not able to. So that's a way of just managing some of those rights restrictions, which are probably a pretty practical concern for most museums. I noticed there's a couple more questions.
Yeah, I apologize. I had a little bit of a lag in my updating on the question, so we do have plenty more to deal with.
Please.
So the question, for websites about places with no physical location, should we note accessibility components of the website on an opening screen? Is that helpful? I'm building a new website for my museum evaluation firm.
Awesome. Not on an opening screen per se, unless if you have a need to display that for everyone, because it's not necessarily the place that most people would come to expect it. However, there are two things that most folks come to expect on websites about surfacing accessibility information. So really quickly, not for your evaluation firm, but for a museum that does have a physical location, under visit, there's almost always an accessibility page. This is really standard practice in museums now. So putting accessibility under the visit category of a website for physical locations, best place to put wheelchair affordances, rentals like that, calling ahead for interpretation, all of those things that we would come to expect about accommodations. Then number two, and this does apply to your specific use case, in the footer of your website where you usually have terms of service or privacy policy, something like that, put an accessibility link there. And on that page, you can put all of the considerations that you've taken and that your website supports for accessibility. If you want an example of a page that you are totally welcome to copy paste from and steal from, as long as it is true, I will caveat it with that. If you go to pac.bz, PAC.bz is the URL. You click on accessibility. There is an accessibility page that models that behavior for you. So it simply talks about some of the coding practices, what we strive to do, and most critically, it invites any visitor to the website to contact us in case they have any questions around the accessibility of the page.
Okay, here's another quick one. Did you talk about, does Facebook have a place to add alt text?
They do in images. It is different though, and they keep changing the interface for galleries versus specific images. So I don't want to steer you wrong on exactly what the field is called. Be aware that they used to call it captions, which is a little confusing because a caption for an image is that thing that we all see and is the text that is not the visual description, but simply may describe who's in the photo or describe the location or have the rights management string there. But they might refer to it as caption, but yes, Facebook does have the ability to write in a description for your photos and for your images as you upload them and post them. So does LinkedIn, I believe.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do 2 more questions as
Go
now
for it.
we are running short on time.
Lightning round.
Right, can you give an example or two of well-designed, accessible websites? I think it would be interesting to hear from each of you.
We always feel nervous about this question because we don't necessarily want to put folks on the spot, and then it sounds a little self-aggrandizing to point to our own website. But m4c.space or Mosaic is a microblog that Corey and I used to run in the before time when there was a lot more travel, and it's pretty well accessible, right? But it's a really good example of minimal effort for maximum accessibility. It's a WordPress theme. We picked an accessible theme, touched up a few things, and made it accessible. So that was the website you saw demoed in that video that we tried to play earlier. And then that pac.bz website I mentioned earlier also tries to be as WCAG conformant as possible. We're happy to maybe share some other links. But again, we try to be careful about this question because then what the reaction tends to be is to go do what that website is doing. And this is exactly the wrong thing to do. You should not copy an accessible website, even remotely. But there are some good examples that different websites do really well. And we could provide some links maybe after this webcast.
And maybe just the Mosaic microblog. We haven't been keeping up on the blogging since the whole idea was highlighting things that we find in our travels. However, we do keep the inclusive design glossary and reading lists both up to date. So almost weekly, we update those, and the reading list does contain a number of different resources, one of which is case studies and examples and tools, etc. It's broken down into different sections. So it's M4C, it's another numeronym for Mosaic, M4C.space. And if you go to the reading list there's a number of examples and tools and all kinds of things that you can access.
Thank you. Okay, this will be our final question, and it's basically, I think, also a final thought from each of you. What is the best way to train or explain accessibility tools, settings, practices to those in my organization who are already having trouble with basic settings with technology when creating content and programming?
Corey, you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a tough one. Everyone, it's almost like a specialized field that we all hope that at some point everyone is digitally literate to a certain level, that it becomes, sort of part of the day-to-day and not a specialized knowledge center. And the same thing goes for inclusive design and accessibility. I think the main thing would be more at the high level. It would be about considering, again, what are our intentions? And who are we doing this for? And then what are those people's intentions? And then making deliberate decisions around something. Are we going to do 0 to 100 and just have it be inaccessible? Or can we do 0 to 50, have it be accessible, and then spend some time chipping away at the remaining 50? I think like that would be our preferred approach. And you might find some of these other outcomes of this approach are things like future scalability and changeability, interoperability, et cetera. So when we make really deliberate decisions around technology and we're thinking about what is the immediate task, but with one eye on the horizon and what's coming next, if we follow an inclusive design methodology and we're considerate about these things, we'll realize the next time we have to update our website, like a grand update, it's going to be a lot less work because everything that's in place is going to facilitate changeability while it's been facilitating accessibility.
And just do it slowly. I mean, if you're having difficulty or have people who are having difficulty with certain technical concepts, that's a problem to solve, right? So if someone is having difficulty using Word correctly, we need to solve that problem. We shouldn't just accept that as being okay, but how can we empower and help that person to understand there's a lot of free resources out there for learning Office well. And this sounds like a trivial thing, but it's not, because when you use Microsoft Word correctly, you have just enabled your institution not only to create accessible documents, but to create accessible PDFs as well, because the save as feature of going from Word to PDF is one of the most accessible ways to create PDFs, which is something that even large institutions struggle with on a daily basis. So take small steps at first and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Thank you, Sina. Thank you, Corey. That was awesome. And I appreciate your time and all of the great questions from our attendees and adding nuts and bolts to this topic as well as practical takeaways. So really appreciate it. And now I'm just going to do a few closing remarks to close out our program for the day. So a few final reminders. Yes, thank you to our attendees. Visit the forum on our website at museum-hub.org to ask any questions. I'm so sorry I couldn't get to them all. They all came in a bunch at the end, so we'll do better at that next time. But that's what this forum is for, to continue the conversation and get your questions answered. Also, please follow us on social media. So the next workshop will focus on ways that small museums can ensure that live streamed and video programming are accessible to and inclusive of individuals of all abilities. And the instructors will address the pros and cons of different video platforms and how to incorporate live captioning, American Sign Language, image descriptions, and other services that were touched on somewhat today. So I will be with you again next week, and I hope you will join us. And I just want to say a huge thanks to all for attending today's session. Have a great rest of your day.